What is your most disturbing secret? Story 1. When I was a little kid, either 5 or 6 years old, I got in trouble for throwing a TV remote at my sister. My dad, a large and intimidating man, stood in the doorway of my room, yelling at me. I was hysterical, and his anger kept escalating. He then demanded that I take my clothes off. Scared and crying, I removed my shirt. Then he told me to take off my pants and underwear. I was in the corner of my room, naked and terrified, staring up at this towering, angry man. Suddenly, his rage disappeared, replaced by shame. He dropped to one knee in the doorway, put his head in his hands, and started crying, saying, "What am I doing? I'm a bad father." I walked over to him, still crying and naked, and told him, "You're not a bad dad." I hugged him. He left the room, and we've never talked about it since. This happened over 30 years ago, but I remember it vividly. Story 2. A few years ago, I worked at Home Depot at the returns desk. Most of my coworkers were elderly, and I was the youngest on the team. One of my colleagues, Margaret, had issues with bowel control due to her medications. She often farted without realizing it, usually loud but harmless ones, even during conversations. We eventually got used to it, though it was awkward at first. One day during a team huddle, a strong, foul smell filled the air, like fresh manure. Moments later, there was another, distinctly different stench. The manager quickly dismissed the meeting, and as we dispersed, one of the team members muttered, "My God, Margaret, what was that?" Story 3. My husband passed away a few years ago. To everyone, I talk about how much I loved him, the good times we had, and how great he was. But in reality, I hated him for every one of the 33 years we were together. He was cruel, both physically and emotionally, every single day. He hid it well and acted decent in front of others, but when we were alone, he was terrible. Now that he's gone, I live alone and am finally finding myself. I've moved to a different state, made new friends, and for the first time, I like who I am. It's been hard to admit to myself that I'm okay, even happy, now that he's gone. I've never said any of this out loud before. Story 4. Okay, this might bring me some shame, but here it goes. My wife makes incredible biscuits and gravy. I never liked them before we got married, but her version changed my mind. Over the years, I've had other versions, some decent, some mediocre, but hers always stood out. One day, a friend and his wife came over, and he offered to cook dinner. He decided to make biscuits and gravy. I was nervous because I wasn't sure how they'd compare to my wife's. I even rehearsed excuses like, "My stomach's been upset," or "I already ate," just in case I didn't like it. When he finished cooking, I braced myself. But to my surprise, his biscuits and gravy were the best I'd ever had. I ended up eating 2 plates. To this day, I think about his version whenever my wife makes hers. I don't say anything, though. I'm not trying to get myself in trouble, so I keep it to myself, hiding my shame. Story 5. A newly discovered younger relative has been trying to connect with my family after researching his background through an ancestry site. He began searching because his mom always avoided the topic of his biological dad. None of us knew about him until recently, when my parents, 2 of my older sisters, and I found out. This was apparently his second attempt to reach out to us, and he suspected our hesitation was because he had come out as gay. We decided to help him find his father and started asking other family members about him. That's when we discovered that this relative was known by some close family members, like aunts, uncles, and grandparents. But he was never mentioned because he was the result of rape by one of my uncles. The family had swept it under the rug to protect my uncle, never told the child who his father was or what he had done, and distanced themselves from him. In contrast, we make an effort to connect with him from time to time and hang out with him. I'm not sure if anyone has told him that we know who his father is or where to find him, but we've confirmed that we've likely seen his father a few times at family gatherings, though that's as far as it goes. Story 6. Sometimes when I'm having a really bad mental health day, I imagine killing people who annoy me in incredibly violent ways. To clarify, I'd never actually do it. I don't have the right to decide who lives or dies, especially not because I'm having a rough day, but I've imagined irritating customers being torn apart by machinery, stabbing someone to death with a biro, smashing into drivers who don't indicate, and feeding bad pet owners to wild animals. These scenarios play out vividly in my mind, down to the blood spatter patterns and smells. I used to be an undertaker working coroner's contracts, so I know what I'm talking about. I want to emphasize again that I'd never harm anyone. I'm far more likely to hurt myself than another person, but for some reason, imagining these scenarios helps. Picturing someone who refuses to indicate at a roundabout being smashed into, their shattered bones. It's oddly cathartic, even though I know it's just a fantasy. Story 7. I've been sexually assaulted so many times in my life that my husband is the only man I feel safe with. When I have to walk into a store alone, I start shaking if anyone so much as talks to me. My family never took me seriously and blamed me for everything because I'm not ugly and have a large chest. Somehow that made the assaults my fault. I don't talk to anyone about it because I'm afraid they'll judge me like my family did. I take Zoloft for anxiety and depression, but I can't vent about my life to anyone, not even my 4 sisters. Being a stay-at-home mom means I'm not supposed to complain because of my privilege. I'd much rather be a normal, functioning human being with a career than have endured any of the assaults that happened to me. I'd empty my bank account right now for that opportunity, but instead I constantly struggle with feeling like I'm enough for my kids and family. My self-image is a constant battle because of what I went through. It makes me feel so much less than I want to be. Story 8. I was molested by my stepfather. When I told my mother about it, she asked me every day if I was sure. One day I noticed she had started smoking again and was crying herself to sleep every night from the stress. The next day I told her I lied about it. She didn't ask any questions and took us back to him. She made me hug him. Years later, she admitted that she knew I hadn't lied about his abuse, but didn't want to leave him, so she didn't press further. She confessed that she thinks about it every day, and all those years she refused to put me in therapy were so I wouldn't tell anyone. Her inaction pushed me to self-harm, which she knew about. We've talked about it many times, but she's never done anything. I love my stepdad too. He raised me. I'll never report him to the authorities because I don't want her to go through another divorce. I'll never tell other family members, especially my cousins, who are like my sisters and adore him. I've always needed someone to talk to about this, but I know I can't tell anyone. Story 9. I won't share my most disturbing secret on my main account. Instead, I'll share a secret about me that only some people know. I regret how boring my life has been so far. For context, I'm a straight man in my early 30s. I never had a high school girlfriend. I didn't even lose my virginity until I was 26 years old. I only went to one homecoming, and it sucked. I never went to my senior prom or on a fun spring break trip in high school or college. I never snuck out of my house or did anything rebellious. I never had one of those young, wild, and free nights. I never studied abroad or could afford to leave the country. I've never lived in a big city with roommates as a 20-something. It's not like I've never done anything. I've taught high school, worked various jobs, traveled around the USA, gone to parties, though nothing wild happened at them, and even played sports. But I'm very close to my family, was terrified of moving out of my hometown, and have never had a carefree adventure. It feels like I'm missing out on life. I know this pales in comparison to other stories, but sometimes I lie awake at night thinking about how I'll never be able to go back in time. It makes me deeply sad. Story 10. My youngest brother physically assaulted me because I was suspicious he had attempted suicide after finding pills outside his bedroom. He beat me so viciously that I got the worst concussion of my life. I had to go to the ER in secret because he and his boyfriend lied to my parents and the police about what happened. The ER doctor told me I was lucky to be alive and should have gone straight there after the assault. To this day, I still have a dent in my head from it. As a result, I became homophobic toward him and his boyfriend, despite being bisexual myself. I was so filled with hate that I called them slurs I never imagined would come out of my mouth. I deny the incident ever happened, but I still feel immense guilt about it, even 4 years later. It's the one thing I couldn't bring myself to admit to in therapy. Even if my behavior was reactionary abuse, I'm ashamed of it and carry that guilt with me. Story 11. My mother used to fly into terrible, violent rages when I was a child, after which she'd ignore me for days before becoming extremely loving and caring again. It felt like an emotional roller coaster. I suspect she was undiagnosed bipolar, as she definitely suffered trauma herself as a child. On several occasions during her worst moments, after slapping me and screaming at me, she would pin me down on the bed and smother me with a pillow. I assumed it was to stop me from crying or screaming. She would do this until the point where I'd almost pass out. In those moments, I truly thought I was going to die. These incidents have left a lasting negative impact on me. Although we have a good relationship now, those rages are never mentioned. I still carry the sadness and frustration of believing my own mother wanted me dead. As someone who now works in education with children, I've had intensive child protection training, which helped me recognize that aspects of my own upbringing were wrong. If the same signs of distress had been noticed in a child I work with today, social services would have intervened. This realization is a source of frustration for me. No one noticed or acted on my distress when I was young. My mother later trained as a teaching assistant and worked with very young children. She was amazing at her job, which makes it even harder for me. I wish she could have shown the same level of care to me as her own child. Knowing she would have received similar child protection training, I often wonder if she ever reflected on her behavior as a mother. Story 12. My sister, who is 10 years older than me, used to beat me almost daily. She once broke my nose by slamming it into a door. She would bend my fingers back until they snapped. She even killed my hamster by throwing it against a wall, laughing like a maniac. It started when I was about 9. I learned from my brother, who is 4 years older, that she had tried to smother me as a baby because she didn't want to lose her position as the only girl. Her hatred of me seemed rooted in my very existence. I struggled in school, had no self-esteem, and was relentlessly bullied. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. My sister was a model and did coca. I knew because I'd seen her use it. My parents didn't know about the abuse or the drugs, as I always made excuses for my injuries. One night, I brought the folded paper of coke I found in her purse to my mom, pretending I thought it was makeup. My dad, who recognized what it was, tasted it to confirm. He immediately started packing black garbage bags with her belongings. As he did this, I broke down and confessed everything she had done to me, the physical and psychological abuse. My dad listened as I told him the real reason I hadn't come forward sooner. She said she would set fire to my room and nail my door shut if I told you. Ironically, my father found a hammer and nails under her bed, which sent him into a rage as he continued throwing her things outside. She was 21, a college student, part of a sorority, a model, and loved by everyone. Meanwhile, I was the fat, sickly kid who was never as good as her. Her voice still lives rent-free in my head when I feel especially unattractive. After she moved out, my parents never looked at her the same during holidays. Before my mother died, she confided in me that she had always wondered if something was wrong with my sister, as she had always been cruel and evil to people. I haven't spoken to her since my mother's death 20 years ago. I've also cut off my brother, as he knew what was happening to me and did nothing to protect me or tell our parents. Only a few friends and my husband know this happened to me. Story 13. I'm not really happy with my marriage or my wife. My wife grew up poor, so she has no real concept of managing money. While we're not rich, we make significantly more than our lifestyle reflects. Yet I constantly have to remind her to stop spending money unnecessarily. She doesn't splurge on extravagant things, but is always buying something. Lunch at work, coffee, clothes and toys for the kids they don't need. Despite doing most of the grocery shopping and meal planning, about 40% of the food she buys ends up in the trash because she doesn't check what we already have before shopping. She's a teacher, which is fine, but she insists on working at private Catholic schools where she's grossly underpaid for her qualifications. She claims not to care about her salary, but expects us to go on vacations twice a year, eat out often, and buy things constantly. If she wants to spend $6,000 on a vacation, it's the top priority. But if I want to spend $3,000 on a home improvement project, it can wait. What makes it worse is that I'm not as attracted to her anymore. She was always overweight, but it didn't bother me when we first started dating. After having 2 kids, she fully embraced the HAZE, health at every size movement, and now there's no reasoning with her. If I mention her weight, I'm rude and don't love her unconditionally. If the doctor brings it up, they're fat shaming. It's not just her size. It's her refusal to even consider that it might be a problem. She's convinced herself the world is wrong about obesity. She argues about the flaws in BMI, but that's hard to take seriously when you're 5 feet 4 inches and nearly 300 pounds. Story 14. I had a mentor at church who taught a youth group class and was like a mix between a favorite uncle and a cool older brother. He had a group of about 6 of us who were close to him, and we'd often go to his house to play Halo, drink Dr. Pepper, and eat pizza. I was the athletic one in the group, constantly working out, so when I complained about back pain, he offered to help. He explained that he dropped out of massage school but still knew the techniques. His massages genuinely worked, and everything seemed above board. there were other people in the room. I didn't take my shirt off, and it was just a group of guys hanging out. Over the years, this happened many times, and I never thought anything of it. Fast forward to my 30s during the Number Me Too movement, and a repressed memory hit me. One of those nights, I fell asleep in his bed. I distinctly remember waking up to him rubbing me, not sewily, but in a way that was overly affectionate. I had morning wood tucked into my waistband, and he was definitely making contact with the head of my penis repeatedly. I was in that hazy, restful state between sleep and being fully awake, but as I became more aware, panic set in. I didn't know how to react without making it obvious I knew what he was doing. Eventually, I faked rolling over in my sleep to make it stop. He got out of bed shortly after, and I pretended to wake up 15 minutes later. Nothing else happened that morning, and we never spoke about it. He continued being a trusted mentor, and I convinced myself it was just a weird dream. But now, I know it was real. I don't know what to do with this information. I can't tell anyone who knows him because it would ruin otherwise positive memories for our group of friends, who still fondly reference those Halo nights as our golden era. I can't share it with the strangers because they dismiss it as just another case of grooming by a church figure, which doesn't capture the nuance of my experience. Legally, nothing criminal happened, or at least nothing provable, and I'm not sure I'd pursue it even if I could. I genuinely have positive feelings about him and our time as mentees. This one incident recontextualizes everything, though, making it seem like grooming that never escalated. It was easier to bury this memory than to confront it, but now here I am writing it out, trying to process what it means. Story 15. About 8 years ago, my dad suddenly passed away, and I had to drive 1,800 miles back home to handle the arrangements. The drive was emotionally draining. I was heartbroken, angry, and feeling every emotion imaginable. While stopping for gas near Washington, D.C., I noticed a man staring at me in the store. I paid for the gas and walked out. As I was pumping gas, he struck up a conversation with me, a total stranger. He slipped me his number, and we went our separate ways. A few minutes later, I realized I was behind him on the interstate. He noticed me through his rearview mirror and sent me a text, calling me beautiful. Then he called, and we started talking over Bluetooth as we drove. We chatted for about 20 miles until he said he was getting off at the next exit and asked me out to dinner. I agreed. We had dinner, drinks, and ended up getting a room. That night, we had incredible stranger-esque. The next morning, we said goodbye, and I never saw or heard from him again. I have no idea if he was married or anything. Neither of us asked. The S was unforgettable, the best I've ever had. I've been married for 12 years now, but nothing has ever compared to that night. Story 16. Years ago, I tried to end my life. I swallowed a massive amount of painkillers, washed them down with booze, and added whatever else I could find. At the time, I was living in my parents' basement and could go days without seeing them. By sheer luck, we had a family friend coming over for dinner that night, and my dad came downstairs to ask me to help cook, something I was known for in the family. What he found was something no father should ever have to see. He had to perform chest compressions on me until paramedics arrived. If no one had come looking for me that evening, I probably wouldn't have been found until the smell became noticeable. I woke up in the hospital a couple of days later. People who've survived jumping from places like the Golden Gate Bridge often describe feeling overwhelming regret on the way down. That's exactly how I felt when I woke up. A profound relief that it hadn't worked. To avoid being committed, I played it off as an accidental overdose. Later, I kept up the story to spare my family the pain of knowing how low I'd fallen. Now I keep the lie because I genuinely want to live, and they don't need to know how bad it once was. For anyone reading this, it took time and effort, but I now have a career I love, a beautiful wife, and the sweetest little boy any parent could ask for. I'm also a sous chef, teaching others the craft I adore. It might sound cliche, but where there is life, there is hope. Story 17. For the past 17 years, I've wanted to die, but I remain tethered to this existence because my parents are alive. I'm not sad about it. Life simply holds no value for me. Each day feels more like a chore than an opportunity to explore or enjoy. Every night, I pray that I don't wake up. I hope for an aneurysm, a heart attack, something that will end it all without me having to take action. If there's a hell, so be it. If there's a heaven, I want no part in meeting the higher being who put all of this in motion. The best outcome would be complete nothingness, no past, no future, just absolute rest. I've thought about finding a mundane job to occupy myself until I muster the courage to end it all, but the economic situation where I live has made that impossible. Meanwhile, I see content creators and others making thousands for minimal effort, and it fuels my disillusionment. Everything around me is falling apart. My house is in ruin, I've stopped caring about my hygiene, and my girlfriend refuses to leave me no matter how many times I tell her it's best for both of us. I can keep up appearances and act like I care about the people around me, but it's all a facade. Death feels like the only reward, and suic seems like the only escape. Story 18. I don't hate people often. I'm generally forgiving and don't hold grudges. But there's one person I dream of killing daily, my paternal grandmother. I consider myself a peaceful and kind person, incapable of causing pain to anyone. But when it comes to her, my extreme sadism emerges. I fantasize about torturing her, making her suffer, and taking her life with my own hands. She's the most toxic, backward, and cruel person I've ever met. Her actions destroyed the lives of her two sons and even her grandchildren. She was abusive during my father's childhood, leaving him a broken and miserable person, though he never acknowledges it. She openly oppressed my mother, ruining her married life and in turn, causing me to suffer as a teen. While most people associate grandparents with love and kindness, I feel nothing but hatred for her. I've fantasized about pushing her off a cliff, choking her in her sleep, slitting her throat with a wire, or simply standing on her neck until she dies. I've even imagined causing her mental anguish, venting my frustrations at her until she feels the pain she's inflicted on others. I don't care what anyone thinks of me for feeling this way. If you were in my position, you might feel the same. I've managed to survive despite her presence in my life, but I often wonder if others in my shoes would have given up entirely. Story 19. When I was 8 years old, someone tried to abduct me. This was in the 1980s in a small ex-mining town in northern England. I was walking down the street when a car pulled up beside me with a man and a woman inside. They rolled down the window and asked for directions. I gave them the directions, but the man said it was too complicated and asked me to get in the car to show them. I said no. Then the woman got out, gesturing toward the open car door, saying it would only take a minute. When I refused again, she grabbed me and nearly pulled me into the car. The man joined in, and I was seconds away from being taken. Somehow, I managed to pull free and run faster than I'd ever moved in my life. This is the first time I've ever expressed this, even if it's just to a keyboard. I never told my parents, family, or friends. At the time, I felt like I'd get in trouble. Later, I felt like I'd be in trouble for not telling sooner. Eventually, it just became something that happened. A secret I've kept to myself all these years. Story 20. When I was 14, I stole my good friend's house keys so I could break in while no one was home and steal all his video games and systems. I was incredibly jealous of the love and affection his family gave him, along with all the gifts they showered him with. I wanted that love, affection, and the games so badly that I betrayed the one person who was kind and welcoming to me. I never admitted what I did to anyone, and I never told him. Years later, when I managed to get a PS5 during the time they were hard to find, I wanted so badly to gift it to him and confess what I had done. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. We stopped talking around 11th or 12th grade, and I've thought about my actions ever since. I deeply regret what I did and how desperate I was at the time. I'm so sorry, Jean. You didn't deserve that, and I still feel like the worst person for stealing from someone who was so kind to me. Story 21. I worry that I'm incapable of true love, or maybe monogamous love, or perhaps I just don't know how to identify my feelings. I'm not sure what it is, but since I was 15, I've only been in long-term relationships, at least a year, with the longest lasting 5 years. I've been in 5 relationships, and they've all ended the same way, until recently. I fall for someone, genuinely believe I'll marry them, and then seemingly overnight, the feelings vanish. I've broken up with every person I've ever loved. I've never been dumped. I always leave first. Now I'm in another relationship, and it's been a year and a half. A few months ago, we briefly broke up because I was going through what my therapist later described as a manic episode. It was the only ugly breakup I've ever had, and we both ended up dating other people during that time. Eventually, we hit rock bottom, got back in touch, sought help from therapists, had long conversations, and decided to get back together. Since then, things have been amazing. But almost every day, I get this creeping fear that I'll repeat the same cycle. I'm terrified of losing feelings for him or hurting him again because I feel like I don't fully understand my own brain. It's a constant worry that I'll ruin what we have, just like I've done in the past. Story 22. When I was a teen in the 90s, I loved building small electronics projects. My mom was always worried about me soldering in my room, convinced I'd make a mess, but I brushed off her concerns. One day I got an etch-your-own circuit board kit from Radio Shack. While working on it, I accidentally spilled the etching fluid on my bedroom carpet, leaving a horrible permanent stain. Since I was home alone, I quickly rearranged the furniture to cover the stain, got rid of the kit, and never said a word about it. After I moved out for college, my parents left my room untouched, as they had no other use for it. 10 years later, when they sold the house, they moved the furniture and found the stain on the otherwise pristine carpet. My mom was incredibly worried and eventually convinced herself that varnish from the furniture must have somehow caused the mark. I never corrected her. Story 23. I'm actually terrified writing this, but after reading some of the other stories, it doesn't seem like such a big deal in comparison. When I was 18, I had a crush on a guy. Let's call him Jay. Neither of us ever made a move, and eventually he got together with my then best friend. They seemed happy, and I tried to move on. At the time, I cringed at the idea of being interested in someone younger. He was 16, and I had the stereotype in my head that guys should be older. After they got together, I found a boyfriend of my own, who I love and have been with for almost 3 years now. The first year with him was perfect. But 2 years ago, I ran into Jay randomly on the street. He told me he and my ex-best friend had broken up and asked if I wanted to meet up for a drink. I said yes, partly because we had been great friends before, and partly because I was curious about why they broke up. I wasn't in touch with my old best friend anymore. When we met, he picked me up in his car, had made reservations, and opened up about his feelings. He admitted that he'd always loved me and felt like getting together with his ex was a mistake. We laughed and talked so much, and it felt like I was a teenager again. The chemistry between us was undeniable, but I told him I couldn't betray my boyfriend, who loves me deeply. He understood, and we haven't spoken much since. But I can't stop thinking about Jay. He's in my dreams sometimes, and it makes me feel incredibly guilty. I love my boyfriend, but he's very introverted and not as outgoing or social as Jay, which I am. When I'm with Jay, I feel alive and carefree, like I'm 18 again. With my boyfriend, I feel like I have to plan everything and sometimes beg for attention, like going on dates or engaging with my stories. He does try, but only because he knows it makes me happy, not because he truly enjoys it himself. Jay, on the other hand, planned everything for our one meeting without me having to ask, and his extroverted energy matched mine perfectly. I'm torn because I know I would be risking a lot if I left my boyfriend for someone I had one date with. My boyfriend's family is incredibly caring, and he makes me feel safe and protected. I'm 22 now, and Jay is 20. I feel like my feelings for Jay are eating me alive, but I also worry that leaving my boyfriend would be a terrible mistake. I don't know if my longing for Jay is real or just a fantasy of what could have been. Please help. I'm struggling to figure out what to do. Story 24. My most disturbing secret, at least in my own head, is that I'm 40 and have never had S. I haven't even come close. I've never been in any sort of relationship where S was a possibility or even a natural progression. But I don't consider myself an incel. I know it's not women's fault that they aren't lining up to date me. How can they, when they don't even know I'm an option? As for why I'm in this situation, the short answer is crippling self-esteem issues. I've been the fat nerd my whole life, someone people are friendly with but not romantically interested in. My early attempts to express feelings of attraction, even as a kid when I didn't fully understand what I was doing, never got me any positive or polite responses. One incident in university stands out. I met a young woman during freshman year and we seemed to have a lot in common. By our third year, I admitted my feelings for her, but it completely ruined our friendship. When I later tried to apologize and rekindle things platonically, she told me she never wanted to speak to me again. That was nearly 20 years ago, and we haven't spoken since. Most days, my status as still in the package doesn't dominate my thoughts. But seeing people I grew up with, married with teenagers, or even young adult children, reminds me of how far behind I feel. And I can't help but think that if I ever do find someone, they and any future kids will never know my mom, who passed away over 15 years ago. Story 25. Growing up, I had a best friend who lived next door and was 2 years younger than me. Their family dynamic was chaotic, but we spent a lot of time together. When I was 8, her dad went to prison for 20 years after one of our neighbors recognized him from America's Most Wanted and called it in. I won't go into detail, but it was related to pedophilia and violence. He had stolen a dead man's identity and was living a double life. By the time he got caught, he had 4 children with my friend's mom. When he was arrested, detectives and reporters questioned us, even though we were so young. I mostly blocked out those memories until COVID. Being stuck at home, drinking less, and smoking less weed than usual, I remembered something horrifying. Her dad once made me and my friend bathe together in front of him. It's wild how the brain protects itself because I have an otherwise excellent memory. But this moment was buried for years. Even now, I haven't told anyone, not even my close group of supportive internet friends, out of respect for my friend's privacy. We still share mutual friends and our lives are intertwined. I can't imagine what he might have done to her when I wasn't around, and the thought terrifies me. He's out of prison now, and I only know him by his fake name. That's the most disturbing secret I've ever held. Story 26. I've had persistent depressive disorder for as long as I can remember, along with a host of other mental illnesses. No matter what I try, therapy, medication, self-help techniques, nothing ever works. I've tried everything imaginable, multiple times, but each failure is more disheartening than the last. Now, I don't even bother getting my hopes up in the first place. I tell others that where there's life, there's hope, and that it's always worth trying to get better. I play the role of the endlessly hopeful supporter convincingly, but it's all an act. Deep down, I don't believe any of it applies to me. I've come to terms with the idea that some people just aren't meant to be happy, and I'm one of them. It feels like a cruel statistical inevitability. Intellectually, I know this mindset is self-perpetuating, and I understand that treatments for mental illness exist. But after years of broken hopes, I'm simply too tired to keep trying. I don't think about dying anymore. Not because I have a newfound will to live, but because I've stopped caring enough to even consider it. Part of me stays alive to avoid hurting the people in my life, but mostly it's apathy that keeps me here. I know one day I'll wake up and it'll be 30 years later, if I even make it that long. I'm not sure what to do with that thought. I'd like to believe that something's got to give, but apparently it doesn't. Story 27. I produced a child with my cousin's girlfriend. They had been trying to conceive for 4 years with no success, and the situation took a toll on both of them. My cousin spiraled into drinking and heavy drug use, while she became deeply depressed, crying often and acting very emotional. One Friday after work, I went to their house to hang out and grill. My cousin was at work, so I asked if I could take a shower. When I came out, she was sitting on the couch in loose-fitting shorts with no panties, clearly ready for intimacy. She told me how devastated she was that they couldn't have a baby, how it was straining their relationship, and how much she loved him. Long story short, I ended up sleeping with her. Right after we finished, my cousin came home, nearly catching us in the act. She didn't even have time to clean herself without arousing suspicion. She just sat on the couch, terrified of giving herself away. I turned off any guilt I might have felt and acted like nothing happened. 8 years later, they're still together and happy. He has no idea that his son is actually mine. She contacted me when the child turned 3, sending me a picture. The resemblance is undeniable. I see my face so clearly in his. She told me she's thankful that my cousin and I share similar features because he truly believes the boy is his. I've kept this secret ever since. Story 28. I've only ever told one person about this, but we don't talk anymore. During the start of quarantine, I hit a really low point. I don't want to blame quarantine for my actions, but my mind wandered and I ended up watching a deeply disturbing type of porn. I won't say what it was, but even now, it fills me with shame and disgust. I felt like I wanted to erase it from my memory and start my life over. I couldn't believe I had gone out of my way to look for something like that. The thought of it still disgusts me to this day. It's been 2 years since I last watched any kind of porn, and those memories still haunt me. I don't get aroused anymore when I think about the vivid scenes I remember from those videos, but I still feel tainted and ashamed. I try to give myself grace, but it's so hard. I keep asking myself why I did it, why I thought it was something worth exploring. Even though I never would have acted on anything like what I watched, and couldn't even if I wanted to since I don't have a penis, it doesn't change how much it bothers me. My life has improved a lot since quarantine, but I still think about what I did. The shame lingers, and I don't feel like I can talk to anyone about it. It's something I never plan to do again, something I never want to revisit, but the memory won't let me move on. Story 29. I almost killed a man when I was younger. Back in Texas, me and the neighborhood bully both had BB guns. Mine was a lever-action BB gun that looked like a Henry rifle. One day I saw him riding his bike, and trying to act cool, I aimed my BB gun at him. I didn't plan to shoot. My finger wasn't even on the trigger. I just wanted to scare him. He started shouting things at me, then rode back to his house, grabbed his BB gun, and came back to shoot at me. I ducked behind a trash can while he shot at me, and I fired back. I still have scars from where he hit me, in the palm of my hand, my left butt cheek, and my right calf. It turned into a full-on BB gunfight. At one point, I blind-fired my gun and suddenly heard his gun drop to the ground. He was on the ground, holding his face and screaming. I walked up to him, feeling triumphant. But when he moved his hands, I realized I had shot him in the eye. His hands were covered in blood, and his eye looked destroyed. Still there, but mangled and horrifying. I panicked. I didn't know what to do, so I just walked away and left him there. Shortly after, we moved away because my dad lost custody of me, and I moved in with my mom. Years later, I thought about him and decided to search for him online. I found someone with his name, and sure enough, he was missing an eye. I made a fake account and asked how he lost it. He replied, "I fell off my bike as a kid and landed in some sticks that stabbed my eye, haha." Not that cool of a story, I know. I knew the truth. I was responsible. I eventually added him with my real account, and surprisingly, we're now really good friends. He's a successful banker, and I'm just a guy working at a tire shop. It's ironic how life turns out. Story 30. I feel like there's an illusion of control over myself. On the surface, I'm extremely empathetic. I help people without hesitation, and they seem to sense that about me. But underneath, it's different. The truth is, I sometimes realize I don't actually care about what happens to the people close to me, as long as it doesn't affect me. There have been times when someone has told me terrible news about a friend, and I've felt nothing. Once I even smiled nervously when I heard a friend was in an accident and became paralyzed. I still haven't processed it, and likely never will. To avoid hurting people further, I've ghosted everyone involved. I figured it's better for them to think I'm just an awful person who disappeared than to deal with my lack of emotion. I judge people, friends included, based on their looks or what they can offer me. I rarely go out of my way for others unless they ask. It's startling how much easier it is for my friends to pay for things or help me than for me to do the same for them. I've wondered if I might have BPD or if I'd even have empathy if I were autistic. The way I care more about how people look or what they can provide makes me question my emotional depth. I can't process sadness. I've only cried once, and it was when I was drunk, about my parents' upcoming brain surgery. I feel like I'm chasing surface-level connections, both in myself and others. At what point does not having compassion or sadness for the people closest to you stop being just weird and start being something darker? Why am I so shallow, and why can't I change it? Story 31. When I was 12, my mom had some sort of breakdown. Her behavior changed drastically. She became impulsive, frenzied, and emotionally out of control. Sometimes it seemed like she was delirious, and her actions were so abnormal and erratic that it felt like living with a completely different person. She started buying random, useless things we had no purpose for. I vividly remember the time she bought 3 Apple Watches and 2 turtles. Most of the stuff ended up being given away because we simply couldn't keep it all. Another thing I'll never forget is how she would cover herself in essential oils and lotions. The smell was so overwhelming that I'd feel nauseous if I stayed in her room for too long. Her actions often felt childish and unexplainable. As I write this, I realize it might not sound as disturbing as it felt at the time, but I struggle to put into words how unsettling it was. This phase lasted for almost 6 months. She was eventually diagnosed with BPD, at least that's what my dad said, and started taking medication. Over time, the behavior just faded away, and she returned to her old self, mostly. There are some minor changes, like how she's terrible at parking now, but that could just be from aging. I don't know all the details about her condition because my dad kept me in the dark, likely because I was too young to understand. From what I've pieced together, she had been dealing with stress at home, and my dad was living in another country for work. My sister told me that my mom had minor depression and insomnia before the breakdown happened. What's ironic is that during this time, My school life was the best it had been in years. I was finally overcoming my social anxiety after struggling with it for 5 years. It felt strange to experience personal growth while my mom was going through such a difficult and confusing time. Story 32. During the holidays when my girlfriend and I were both 19, she stayed at my parents' house with me. We were just starting to have and one night we were dry humping naked in my room. She was very wet, and I asked if she wanted me to go down on her. She said yes, so I did. Usually everything was great, but this time her taste was really off. Awful, honestly. But I kept going because I wanted to please her. I was lying on my side between her legs when I suddenly felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my D. It felt like I'd been stabbed with a needle. I stood up to check and noticed blood on my D. Freaking out, I thought I'd cut myself. I rushed to my parents' ensuite bathroom to inspect the damage. Standing there, I saw a giant lump on my D, along with blood. Panicking, I called for my mom, who was a nurse, because I thought this was a serious medical issue. She came into the ensuite, and I was standing there half erect, covered in blood, and smelling of my girlfriend. As she asked what was wrong, I looked in the mirror and realized my face was also covered in blood. Then I put two and two together. My girlfriend had started her period while we were dry humping, and the blood had gotten on both my face and my D. The lump on my D turned out to be a mosquito bite. A massive one, probably from the tropical bugs we have in our area, which must have been drawn to the blood. My mom's mouth was hanging open, speechless, as I hastily told her, "Nothing, it's fine, just get out." She left, clearly bewildered, and I went back to my girlfriend. We didn't really talk about it afterward. It was one of the most awkward and bizarre moments of my life. Story 33. During a trip to Thanjavur, South India, I visited an astrologer known for his Nadi Josiam readings. Unlike traditional astrologers, he didn't ask personal questions or rely on typical methods. Instead, he used my thumbprint and ancient palm leaf manuscripts to reveal startling insights about my life. His predictions about my future were disturbingly accurate, including a near-fatal accident and a series of life challenges. But what shook me the most was his revelation about my past life and a curse tied to my actions centuries ago. According to him, I lived as a lower-middle-class individual in Chidambaram. After my father's mysterious death, I was consumed by rage and sought revenge, brutally killing my family members, except for my mother. She later died of shock upon discovering my crimes. Fueled by this path of violence, I gained immense power and wealth, becoming a merciless figure who killed thousands without remorse. I was described as a personification of evil, feared and hated by many. Late in that life, I encountered a differently abled girl who softened my heart and sparked deep regret for my actions. In an attempt to atone, I donated all my wealth and sought spiritual redemption. Despite my efforts, the astrologer revealed that my actions had left a profound karmic imprint, a curse that not only affects me in this lifetime, but also ripples across hundreds of others, entangling their lives with mine. He warned that this karmic debt would persist unless I found a way to truly break the cycle. The encounter left me haunted, forcing me to reflect on the weight of past actions and the responsibility they carry across lifetimes. Story 34. In 2018, I discovered that my girlfriend of 8 years had been cheating on me by performing orals on at least 10 men during our relationship. The revelation devastated me, but when I confronted her, she begged me not to leave her and claimed she was truly sorry. Against my initial instincts, I decided to try to forgive her and work through it. Over time, I thought I had moved past the betrayal. In 2023, we got married. However, doubts have started to creep back in. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake in forgiving her because the memories still make me angry. What's confusing and troubling is that lately I've started to get aroused by the thought of her past actions. I've even found myself masturbating to the idea of her giving oral to other men, which makes me feel conflicted and ashamed. To complicate matters further, she recently confessed that when she was 13, she had a long-term relationship with her 29-year-old neighbor, giving him oral until her senior year of high school. This added layer of her past has only intensified my feelings of confusion. We're now expecting our first baby, and while I'm incredibly happy about becoming a father, the demon of the past continues to haunt me. I'm caught between anger, arousal, and depression. I feel lost and don't know how to handle these emotions or how to truly move forward. I'm trying to do the right thing for my family and my wife, but this inner battle feels overwhelming. I just want to find peace and focus on building a future with her and our child. Story 35. Growing up, I was exposed to a lot of porn by people close to me, and I was also messed with by three different individuals. It feels strange to label it as sexual abuse or molestation because part of me feels like it wasn't that bad, but at the same time, I think about it every single day. I told my family about one of those three people, but my mother didn't believe me. Later, I came across a comment online that said, "If they didn't believe you, they already knew." That wrecked me. It sent me spiraling, and I self-harmed again after that. It didn't help that this happened close to my birthday, a time of year I already struggle with mentally. I hate my birthday and was already feeling low, but everyone around me kept pushing me to celebrate or do something special. All I wanted was to be left alone. Now, I've limited contact with my family. My mother still tries to push me to see her and constantly says she doesn't understand what she did wrong. I've told her in detail why I'm upset, but she never really apologizes. Instead, she says things like, "Sorry I'm such a bad mother," which always feels manipulative, like she's fishing for sympathy instead of owning up to her actions. It's painful to talk about my family, and whenever I share stories with friends, they tell me that the things I went through weren't normal. That realization stings because it confirms what I've always felt but didn't want to face. Story 36. I used to struggle with suicidal thoughts and self-harm for years. What stopped me from going through with it was the guilt of leaving my parents to deal with my toxic, meth-addicted brothers on their own. I hid my struggles for a long time, but everything came to a head after my truck accident in 2017. For 4 to 6 years, I bottled up my emotions, masking my self-harm scars and covering them with tattoos. I tried to pretend everything was fine. One day, I couldn't take it anymore and snapped. It started when I accidentally let my rage spill out on one of my meth-addicted brothers and his girlfriend, driving her away. I've never felt anger like that before. That was the breaking point. I told my parents everything, that I'd been hiding my scars, my depression, and my pain for years. I told them I was done pretending, especially since they seemed more concerned with enabling my brothers than caring about me or anyone else in the family. I also snapped at my brother. I told him to pack his things and prepare to live on the streets. I let him know exactly how I felt about him and laid bare everything I thought he believed about me. I pushed him into a state of paranoia. Ironically, that might have been the wake-up call he needed. He started showing some signs of sanity afterward. I still deal with the aftermath of those years. I have PTSD and panic attacks, especially when I see open wounds on my body. My depression isn't as severe as it used to be, but it lingers, and my perspective on life is bleak and frustrated. For now, I'm just trying to keep moving forward, even if it feels like it doesn't matter much at the moment. Story 37. Back in high school, during a tech ed project where we built and raced toy cars down the hallway, I did something I've never admitted to anyone. I was bullied relentlessly in school, and one guy in particular made my life miserable for years. By junior year, the bullying had mostly stopped, but the bitterness from all those years still lingered. He was in my tech ed class, and one day he wasn't there. Maybe he was sick or had something else going on. This was during the final days of the project, and his car was nearly finished. It looked amazing, like a winning contender. When I saw his project sitting in the storage closet, I gave in to a sudden, awful temptation. I grabbed it instead of mine and spent the entire class destroying it while pretending to work on my own. I drilled random holes, cut a wheel in half, ruined the axle holes, and even wrote Pinnis Mobile on the side. By the end of class, his car was still in one piece, but looked and functioned like absolute garbage. There was no way it could race more than a few inches without stopping. When he returned to class and saw what happened, he raised hell. But even the teachers didn't like him, so while they believed him, they didn't care enough to help. They delayed the race day by a few days, giving him just enough time to patch it up. He frantically worked to fill in the holes and paint over the bright Pinnis Mobile lettering, but the damage was too much. On race day, every student took pictures with their cars. His looked like a total disaster. Swiss cheese on wheels with Pinnis Mobile still faintly visible under 3 coats of paint. He looked so pissed in the photo, and I have to admit, I found it deeply satisfying at the time. It's been over a decade since then, and part of me wants to anonymously tell him, "It was me who wrecked your Pinnis Mobile project." I still laugh about it, but the truth is, we were all just kids. He's now married and seems like a decent guy, and I've let go of the grudge. School was hard on everyone, and holding on to anger poisons the soul. While I still laugh at the memory sometimes, I know it's a part of my past that I've grown from. Story 38. My mother-in-law passed away a couple of years ago, but about 5 years ago, she went through a very deep depression. It was largely the result of her own choices. She was taking a month's worth of Percocet in a week and binge drinking until her prescription could be refilled, repeating this cycle over and over. She completely withdrew from everyone, and none of us knew how bad things had gotten until Christmas came around and she didn't show up. My nephew, who lived with her at the time, spilled the truth. Things were far worse than anyone had imagined. She had been sitting on the couch for days in her own waste. Deceased pets weren't being removed from the house. The home was in total disarray, unfit for anyone to live in, let alone a teenager like my nephew. A week after Christmas, my husband got word that she had been picked up by Adult Protective Services and taken to a behavioral health facility against her will. CPS also got involved because my nephew was a minor. Everyone assumed her neighbors had called APS, as they had threatened to do so in the past. The truth is, it was me. I called APS after hearing how bad things had become. I requested anonymity because I knew it could cause issues in the family, but my only concern was for my nephew's safety and well-being. Thankfully, my request was honored, and to this day, no one knows I reported her. After being taken to the behavioral health facility, she spent a significant amount of time receiving treatment. Eventually, she managed to pull herself together, at least enough to satisfy CPS and avoid being involuntarily committed. While her passing a couple of years later was tragic, I still believe making that call was the right decision for everyone involved. Story 39. During the pandemic, my father passed away. Shortly after, my brother sold his house and moved his family of 4 into my mom's home to take care of her on our family's small 2-bedroom, 1-bath farm. He promised to add on to the house to accommodate everyone, and I was given $20,000 as compensation for the acres my dad had left me. But within 4 months, everything fell apart. My mom sued my brother to get him and his family out of the house because he never followed through on building the additional rooms he promised. In retaliation, my brother sued me to get the $20,000 back. By then, I'd already spent the money on necessary repairs for my own home. Desperate to salvage what was once a great relationship with my brother, I took out an awful loan to repay him. Giving that money back left me and my family in financial hardship, and the stress took a massive toll on my mental health. I ended up in a mental health institution for 3 months and now see a therapist once a month. I even quit my high-stress job for a lower-paying but less demanding one. Despite all this, I still experience panic attacks when I visit my brother or see my mom. My ability to make basic decisions has been deeply impacted. I can't even explain the full extent of how much my life has changed since this happened. To make matters worse, my brother later purchased my parents' family home for $120,000. My mom, exhausted from the fighting, chose to take the money and walk away. They haven't spoken to each other since. Holidays, once a joyful time for our family, are now beyond depressing. The emotional and familial damage feels irreparable, and I'm left wondering if we'll ever recover from everything that's happened. Story 40. My grade 5 teacher was a strict disciplinarian, but in a good way. She had a chart with 10 classroom rules, and anytime a student broke one, they had to stay after school in detention and fill out a detention slip. The slip required the student to write down the rule they broke, how they planned to improve, and have it signed by a parent to be returned the next day. I got so many detentions that I started forging my mom's signature on the slips. At one point, my teacher asked me if the signatures were real, and I was terrified she'd show them to my mom. Just before parent-teacher interviews one day, I panicked. After school, I stole every single detention slip from my teacher's desk. For months afterward, who stole the detention slips became a mystery that my teacher would ask the class. She'd sometimes look at certain students, almost as if she knew who the culprit was. These were kids who had more detentions than me, but I doubt they had forged their parents' signatures like I did. No one ever found out it was me. I'm 45 years old now, and it's a secret I still think about and plan to take to my grave. Story 41. Back when I was younger, the neighborhood bully and I both had BB guns. This was Texas, so of course we did. Mine looked like a Henry lever-action rifle, where you loaded BBs into a tube below the barrel. One day I saw him riding his bike, and thinking I was cool, I aimed my BB gun at him. My finger wasn't on the trigger. I didn't actually plan on shooting him. I just wanted to intimidate him. He kept riding by, shouting things at me that I can't even remember. Eventually, he rode to his house, came back out of his garage with his own BB gun and started shooting at me. I ducked behind a trash can and fired back. He managed to hit me a few times. I still have scars on the palm of my hand, my left butt cheek, and my right calf. At one point, I fired blindly in his direction and heard his gun hit the ground. When I looked, he was curled up on the ground, holding his face and screaming. I walked up to him, thinking he was just overreacting, until I saw his hands covered in blood. He moved his hands and I realized I'd shot him in the eye. His eye wasn't gone, but it looked badly damaged, like it had partially exploded. In our neighborhood, kids running around with BB guns wasn't unusual, and no one really cared about the chaos. I panicked and just walked away, leaving him there. Not long after that, my dad lost custody of me, and I moved in with my mom in a different town. Years later, he popped into my head. Out of curiosity, I searched for him online and found him. It was the same name, and sure enough, he was now missing an eye. I created a fake account and messaged him, asking how he'd lost it. He replied, "I fell off my bike as a kid and landed in some sticks that stabbed my eye." Ha ha, not that cool of a story, I know. I knew the truth, but didn't say anything. Eventually, I added him with my real account, and surprisingly, we became good friends. He's now a successful banker, and I'm just a guy working at a tire shop. Life is strange, and sometimes the past finds a way to catch up with you, even if it's in unexpected ways. Story 42. Last year, a coworker and I started talking and got really close, really fast. We discovered that we grew up in neighboring towns and frequented the same places but somehow never met. In September, we started hooking up. She had just come out of a 9-year emotionally and mentally abusive relationship a few months earlier. After a couple of weeks, her ex came crawling back, begging for forgiveness and claiming he had been in therapy and worked on his issues. She decided to take him back. The abuse quickly started again. Since he traveled frequently for work, sometimes for weeks or months at a time, she and I ended up rekindling things. It turned into a full-blown relationship while he was away. By the end of December, I couldn't take it anymore. I broke off the affair because it was destroying me emotionally and mentally. She constantly told me I was the best guy she'd ever met, but she wouldn't leave her abuser. Hearing, "You're amazing, but you're still not enough," was devastating. It's hard to describe how much that messes with you unless you've experienced it yourself. We stayed friends and hung out a few times after that. Nothing physical happened, but there was still an undeniable connection. The other day, I got a text from her saying she didn't want to give me the wrong idea about our friendship. She thanked me for being there for her over the past year, admitted she hadn't always been fair to me, apologized, and said we shouldn't hang out for a while. I replied respectfully and agreed, but it completely wrecked me. What really stings is that she was the one who told me she loved me first, said we were soulmates, and talked about having kids together. I know logically, she was likely using me to fill the emotional and physical void left by her abuser, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. The worst part? I got really attached to her dog, and the feeling was mutual. That dog felt like family to me. Now I'll probably never see it again. Losing her was painful, but losing that connection with her dog feels like an extra stab to the heart. It's just all really hard to process.